Along with foodstuffs, other goods increased in variety and number, which in turn caused a growth in consumption. This growth of consumption is sometimes referred to as the Consumer Revolution. During the revolution, people derived their self-identity from their consuming practices along with their working life. These new options of goods that people could choose from sparked individuality and self-expression. People could stand out because of their clothes. Big shop windows, marketing campaigns, and increased supply contributed to the increased demand. Furthermore, fashion was changing greatly and fashion merchants at the time were very successful. This was due to a rise in consumption of clothing, especially in large cities. At home, Parisians' wardrobes increased in size, value, and diversity from 1700 to 1789. In addition, colonial economies were important in lowering the cost of materials such as cotton and vegetable dyes, made possible by enslaved Africans. It wasn't just the high classes that could partake in fashion. Cheap copies of elite styles allowed for lower classes to explore fashion. This surprised some rich people, because they weren't expecting to see poor people such as their milkman in stylish outfits. This equal fashion opportunity blurred the lines between the social groups and made it tough to distinguish between noble and commoner on the street. Overall, women outconsumed men in clothing, owning bigger and more expensive wardrobes.
In the 18th century, the common people depended on bread similarly to earlier times. Peasants in the Beauvais region of France ate as much as 2 pounds of bread a day. The rural poor would often also eat many vegetables. Peas and beans were the most common, as they were grown by farmers for many years. The vegetables were eaten fresh in the spring and summer and cooked in stews in the winter months. Milk was not drunk, but only used to make cheese and butter. The common people generally ate less meat than in the previous centuries, as the prices of meat rose higher than the peasants could afford. Traders and artisans had a wider variety of dishes which included meat and fruit, but still included a heavy amount of bread and beans. The diet of the rich was much more colorful than the peasants. The upper class consumed an abundance of rich meat and fish. The dinners also included cheeses, sweets, and wine. Dinners were often very long and spent with witty conversations between the upper class. Patterns of food consumption changed within the emergent developments of the 18th century. Due to the growth of the gardening industry, a greater number of vegetables were present in towns and cities, especially in England and the Low Countries. The potato, which came from the New World, provided a significant source of food for carbohydrates, calories, and vitamins. The most significant change in the 18th century was the increase in consumption of goods imported from abroad. Items such as tobacco, sugar, and chocolate were implemented into all classes of society. Most of these new items came from European colonies in the New World. Due to increased working in the 18th century, Europeans increasingly consumed stimulants such as tea and coffee. Due to this increase in consumption, Europeans became dependent on colonial products and slave labor.
During the 18th century, a lot of improvements to homes were made for more comfort and practicality. First was the making of rooms. Families used to live in one big room, so smaller rooms were made for more privacy. Second was the improvement in glass making. This would make the windows clear, letting the sun shine through, which would make the inside lighter. Third was the decrease in the price of books. This would allow for more people to afford books, which would make the education rate higher. Other things that helped form a more comfortable lifestyle were street lights for safer traveling, and coal stoves were being made to replace smoky hearths. Another improvement was the rise in hygiene. Europeans used to be scared of hot water as they thought it would cause infections under their skin, so they wouldn't take baths. An example of this is James I, who would only wash his hands. Bathhouses had also closed in Europe due to the spread of diseases. Hygiene in this time period was defined by wearing fresh linen and perfume, which were expensive practices that showed your wealth. Spa towns were created for the wealthy as a resort to increase health. Officials also started cleaning the dirty streets. Although this sounds great, these developments were only centered around the big cities, but spread everywhere in the late 19th century with the Industrial Revolution. The 18th century laid a foundation to societies based on the consumption of goods.
Surge of childhood education in the 18th century. There was a surge of childhood education in the 18th century. In the 1600s, 1 out of 6 males were barely literate in France and Scotland, and 1 out of 4 males were barely literate in England. By the 1800s, 9 out of 10 Scots adult men were literate. 2/3 of French males were literate, and over half of the English adult men were literate. The women's literacy levels were also up, but they were lagging behind men. What did the people actually read then? The Bible was the favorite, especially in the Protestant countries. The Bible was translated into multiple languages, so it was easy to read for the common peasant. Chapbooks were also read, but they are short pamphlets made of the cheapest paper possible. Chapbooks contained Bible stories, prayers, lives of saints, and exemplary Christians. They also contained humorous stories, fairy tales, medieval romances, true crime stories, fantastic adventures, and basically everything what could take the person away from their sad normal life. Also, practical books were read. They contained rural crafts, household repairs, and useful plants. Almanacs were books which contained mostly the calendar, but also had days of saints and other religious celebrations. These were other books that were also made. Enlightenment was a factor in the normal life of an urban worker. They got exposed to it in the streets, across markets, and in taverns. Basically, anywhere where there were a lot of people. The pamphlets about enlightened ideas were transformed to ordinary language, which helped the ordinary people read the simple text. One good example of enlightened ideas coming from ordinary people was Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine was an English corset maker's son. He left school at age 12 to help his father in the business. He moved to the colonies, where in 1776 he wrote the pamphlet named Common Sense. This pamphlet had enlightened ideas of the right of the people of the colonies being able to rule themselves. In the first month of it being available, it sold 120,000 copies.
Hey AP Euro, how's it going? I'm Xanon Forboard. Well, I have a question for you. Have you ever thought about how people in 1500s Europe enjoyed leisure without modern media? Ew. Instead, it was all about communal events and traditions. Yeah, festivals and religious feasts were key to social life, tied together with agriculture and literal culture. Towns gathered for things like music and dance, feasting, which reinforced the social bonds and provided a relief from daily work. But don't forget about hunting. For the nobility, it was a display of power and status, with exclusive hunting grounds for elaborate hunting spaces. Also, theater grew in the 1500s. Performances, often like town squares or hotels, allowed people from all classes to come together and witness stories that reflected today's values and conflicts. And these activities weren't just for fun. They reflected social structures and values. Like festivals reinforced the church's role, hunting showcased the nobility's privilege, and theater allowed society to reflect on itself through stuff that, like art.